Hi, I'm Billy. And welcome to Jack of Traits. In this video, we will learn to implement the user access roles feature using the Laravel middleware. To briefly explain what a user access roles feature does, think of it as a way for us to determine whether a specific type of user is allowed to access a particular page. We will add a feature that controls the user's permission that uses our software, especially when they are logged in. Of course, we will write a particular function that will handle that logic. For us to do that, we will use the Laravel middleware feature to handle our logic for the user access roles feature. There are pre-written middlewares included in the installation every time you start a Laravel app. The most apparent middleware we often see in a Laravel app is the authentication middleware. To put it simply, the authentication middleware handles the logic for the users logging into your app. You can find the registered middlewares in the app, http, Kernel.php in your Laravel app. Like the authentication middleware, we will also create another simple middleware to handle the user's permission depending on the user's role. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. First off, we are going to add another field called role to our users table. The role field will help us determine what type of user that is currently authenticated in our session. So to add the role field, let's create another migration file for it like so. Let's go ahead and edit our migration file. We needed to have a default role for a user to make it easier for us to create some validations or logic afterward. In our case, let's just set the default string to user. After that, run php artisan migrate to add the role field in the users table. Now that we added the field, let's make the first user role to admin. I have added another user in the users table manually to test the logic of our user access role feature. To generate a new custom Laravel middleware, just run php artisan make middleware and your middleware name. In our case, we are just naming our middleware ensure user role is allowed to access. After we run it, we will see a newly generated file inside our Laravel app directory. And that is inside our app, http, middleware folder. Inside this file, we will add our very own custom logic to handle a user's permission based on a specific role. But before we can use our middleware class file, we still have to register it inside our kernel file inside the app, http directory. Open the kernel file and add it to the route middleware array. Don't forget to copy the exact namespace of the class file so that Laravel can locate it. Remember that you can custom name your middleware. In our case, we just named our middleware as access role so that it's descriptive enough. We will call our middleware in our routes file later. Don't forget to add the role field in the fillable array inside our user model class file too. Now that we have that set up, let's go to the routes, web.php and add our middleware in our route group. Remember that this route group also has the auth sanctum and verified middleware to check if the user is logged in and if the user is also verified. The route handles our access to the specific pages in our Laravel app. And since the route group has authentication middleware to handle the session of the user, it's reasonable enough to add another logic to determine whether a user has access rights to these specific routes even if they are already logged in. Thus, We will also add our middleware to provide another checking if the user has the right to access these pages. For now, our app is still simple. We have a dashboard, pages, and navigation menus routes. These routes that we mentioned briefly are the web routes that need a user session before we can access them. In the meantime, we will just list them down here so that we can have a reference later when we add the logic. But for us to see whether our custom middleware for the user access role is being run, let's write a little bit of checking. Alright. Now that we know that it runs every time we access the dashboard or any routes in the route group, let's go ahead and add another logic. You can also see that our custom echo message is gone every time we remove the access role. Now to understand the logic that we are going to implement here, you will realize that it is straightforward. First, you need to know the role of the currently logged in user. In Laravel, you can access the information of the current logged in user by just calling the auth user function like so. In our case, we can directly access the role of the user by doing so. Let's echo the information out to verify. As you can see, the role of the current user is admin. Second, we also need to know the information about the current route that we are accessing. We need the user role and the current route for our custom user access role validation later. Alright. As you can see, we now have the information on our user role and current route name. Let's go ahead and switch to another account that has a role type of user. After this, we will have the heart of our user access role logic. As of the moment, there are 3 available routes when a specific user is signed into our Laravel app. Those route names are the dashboard, pages, and navigation menus. To accomplish our goal, we need to add logic to determine if the current user can access a particular page. For now, so that we can grasp the concept smoothly, we will create a simple function that has static array values. We will name this function user access role. The information of the array values inside this function will have the user and the admin as keys. We will establish this information as thoroughly as possible to effectively understand this concept because we are dealing with two-dimensional arrays. Here, you will see that we are trying to group the route names on a specific user role. The first group of an array is the user, which only contains the dashboard route name. The second group of an array has the pages and the navigation menus route names. By making this approach, we will know what routes a specific user role has only access to. Note that this is only an example of data for the access role. The reason why we make this approach so that we can easily understand how this is implemented. In a real-world application, we will need to store this data in the database table. But for now, let's just have this information here for simplicity's sake. Every time you query database information, you will always retrieve two-dimensional arrays as the primary laid-out information. That is why we are using a two-dimensional array to store the data of our user access roles in this example. And for the main event, We will now add the simple if statement to determine if the current route name is available for this specific user. The inArray function is a native PHP function that takes two parameters. The first parameter takes a non-array value, which could either be a string or a number. The second parameter accepts an array value. The inArray function checks if the first parameter value exists inside the list of items in the second parameter, which is an array of values. The inArray function returns a Boolean value, either true or false. Notice the second parameter. Since the user access role function returns an associative two-dimensional array that are grouped based on a specific role, we can easily access the information of those array values by just passing the user role variable inside the array bracket. Just like we usually do with array data types. And if the condition is true, we will return the next request. And of course, if our condition is false, we will throw an error page. If you notice, the currently logged in user has the role value of user. And remember, the information we provided for the user in our code has the dashboard route name only on its list. That is the reason why we can only see the dashboard route. Subsequently, when we try to log in as a user with an admin role, we will witness that we can only access the pages and the navigation menu's routes. There may be some cases that were not covered in our user access role logic. So it's better to keep our code inside a try-catch statement just to be sure. And that's how we can quickly implement a user access role in Laravel. In the next videos, we will refactor our code and add another simple feature to assign a specific user role to access individual routes. We will not be using our user access role that returns a two-dimensional array. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, comment, share, and subscribe if you're new to this channel. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll get notified whenever a new video is up. Stay tuned, and see you in the next video.